They will never tell you this. But the truth is simple. The moment you stop trying to explain yourself to people who never cared to understand you, you become untouchable. Think about it. Every time you bend over backwards, trying to justify your choices, your dreams, your pain, what you're really doing is handing over pieces of your power. You're telling the world, please, validate me. Please, agree with me. Please, don't misunderstand me. And every time you beg for understanding, you are quietly putting chains around your own neck. Men don't realize how much of their life they waste trying to explain. A boy learns early on, when he's scolded for being too loud, too wild, too different, that if he explains himself enough, maybe he'll be accepted. He grows up into a man who still carries that wound. He explains why he couldn't afford something. He explains why he chose a different path. He explains why he walked away from a relationship. He explains and explains and explains, thinking one day, someone will finally say, now I understand you. Now you're worthy. But that day never comes, because people don't want your explanations. They want your submission. They want you small. They want you apologetic. They want you on your knees. And here's the tragedy, brother, every time you explain yourself to someone who doesn't deserve your truth, you kill a little bit of your own soul. You turn your strength into weakness. You exchange your dignity for scraps of approval. And at the end of the day, you're still misunderstood, still disrespected, still left alone in silence, wondering why no one ever saw the real you. But let me ask you something. When was the last time the men you respect, the men who walk with unshakable confidence, ever explain themselves? They don't. Because they know this one truth explanation is a form of begging, and a man who begs for understanding is a man who has already lost. Picture this: a man stands in a crowded room. Everyone is judging him, whispering, questioning. They want him to defend his choices, his silence, his decisions. They're ready for him to start spilling his words, desperate to clear the air. But instead, he says nothing. He looks them in the eye, and he doesn't justify a single thing. That silence, that refusal to explain, terrifies them more than any speech could. Because silence is power. Silence is untouchable. Silence is the mark of a man who knows who he is and doesn't need anyone else to agree. But before a man can reach that silence, he first lives through the prison of explaining. And that's where most men are trapped today. You can feel it, can't you? That constant urge to defend yourself, even when nobody's listening. You explain your failures, hoping people will forgive you. You explain your dreams, hoping they'll believe in you. You explain your pain, hoping someone will finally understand the weight you carry. But deep down, you know, it never works. The more you explain, the less they respect you. The more you justify, the smaller you become. And this is where the silent war begins. Because the man who explains is living for others. He shapes his words to protect their feelings. He bends his truth to fit their expectations. He chooses his steps based not on his path, but on how he'll explain it later. And without realizing it, he becomes a prisoner of their judgment, a slave to their perception. But the man who refuses to explain, he breaks the chains. He stops justifying. He stops seeking permission. He stops apologizing for being who he is. And in that moment, the world can no longer touch him. They can gossip, they can judge, they can misunderstand, but they cannot control him. Because he has taken back the one thing they used against him, his need to be understood. I want you to imagine your own life right now. Think about how many times you've sat awake at night, rehearsing conversations in your head, planning how you'll explain your side, your feelings, your truth. Think about how many hours you've wasted trying to make others see your intentions. And now I want you to picture this. What if you stopped? What if, from this moment on, you decided you don't owe anyone an explanation? What if you lived by one rule: my life is mine, and I will walk it without defending it? That's when you become dangerous. That's when you become free. That's when you become untouchable. But don't get me wrong, this isn't easy. The urge to explain is like a drug. It gives you a temporary hit of relief, a feeling of safety. You think, if I just tell them why, maybe they'll see me differently. But it never lasts, because those who demand explanations from you don't want the truth. They want control. And every explanation you give is you handing them the leash. Let me tell you a story. There was a man who always wanted to create something of his own. He had ideas, visions, plans that didn't fit the mold. But every time he took a step forward, he explained himself. He explained to his family why he was different. He explained to his friends why he didn't want the same life they did. He explained to his partner why he needed space, why he was restless, why he couldn't just be normal. And guess what? Every time he explained, they pulled him back. You're wrong. You're selfish. You're wasting your life. And because he had explained, he had given them the power to reject him. Until one day, he stopped. He realized that his vision needed no defense. His choices needed no approval. His truth needed no explanation. And the moment he stopped, everything changed. He wasn't just free, he was feared. Because when a man no longer begs to be understood, he becomes unpredictable. He becomes unstoppable. Brother, I want you to hear me with your whole soul right now. The world doesn't need your explanations. The world needs your silence, your discipline, your focus, your results. Speak when it's necessary. Defend when it's life or death. But don't you dare explain yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you. Because the more you talk, the less they hear. But the more you walk in silence, the more they feel your presence. A man is never untouchable because of how well he explains. He's untouchable because he doesn't. That's the power. That's the transformation. That's the first step into becoming the kind of man who no one can break, no one can manipulate, no one can control. So listen carefully. Part 1 of this journey is about the prison you're in right now, the prison of explaining. Recognize it. Feel the weight of it. See how it has drained your life. And then get ready, because in part 2, we're going to step into the silence that builds power. But for now, let this sink in. You don't owe the world an explanation. You never did. And the day you stop begging to be understood is the day you finally taste freedom. There comes a moment in every man's life where he must decide, will I keep explaining myself until I die, or will I finally let silence speak for me? Because here's the truth. Your silence says more than 1,000 explanations ever could. The world can argue with your words, but it cannot fight your silence. Your silence terrifies them because it forces them to face themselves. Think about it. Why do people demand explanations from you in the first place? It's not because they care about your truth. It's because they feel powerless in the presence of your independence. They sense your difference, your refusal to fit their mold, and it unsettles them. They crave your words not to understand you, but to control you. If they can drag an explanation out of you, they can twist it, mock it, reject it. But if you stay silent, they have nothing to grab. They are left powerless in front of you. That's why silence is power. It's not emptiness. It's a weapon. It's a shield. It's the mark of a man who has outgrown the need to be understood. And brother, when you reach that point, you step into a whole new life. I know what you're thinking. It's not easy. It feels unnatural. We're raised to believe that communication solves everything. Explain yourself and they'll understand. They told us. But did they? Or did your explanations only give them more reasons to doubt you, more fuel to criticize you? Look at your past. Every time you defended yourself, did it really change their mind? Or did it only prove to them that you were desperate for their approval? Here's the truth. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. Silence is control. You see, a man who explains himself is reacting. A man who stays silent is leading. I remember a story of a man betrayed by his closest friends. They accused him of selfishness, of pride, of thinking he was too good for them. They pushed him to explain, to defend his heart, his intentions, his loyalty. He stayed silent. They raged, they mocked him. But years later, when his life had risen to heights they could never touch, that silence echoed louder than any defense ever could. He didn't need to say a word. His success spoke for him. His silence was his vengeance. His silence was his power. And that is the hidden truth I want you to understand. The less you explain, the more they watch. The more you speak, the less they listen. The less you justify, the more they respect. Because silence forces them to face the reality they cannot escape. You don't need them. But don't confuse silence with passivity. Silence is not about doing nothing. It is about channeling your energy where it matters. While most men waste their lives defending themselves to people who don't care, the silent man invests his time into building himself. He doesn't explain why he's in the gym. He just trains. He doesn't explain why he's working late. He just builds. He doesn't explain why he cut certain people off. He just walks away. And one day, when his results stand tall before the world, those same people will whisper, "How did he do it?" And he won't answer. Because he doesn't need to. Brother, this is where transformation begins. The silence you choose today becomes the strength you carry tomorrow. Stop giving your energy to those who demand explanations. Start giving it to your mission, your purpose, your growth. Let your actions roar while your words rest. Because at the end of the day, they cannot argue with what they see. Now let's go deeper. Why does silence make a man untouchable? Because silence is rooted in self-trust. You cannot stay silent if you don't trust yourself. That's why so many men explain. They don't believe in their own decisions, so they need others to validate them. They think, if I don't explain, maybe they'll think I'm wrong. But the untouchable man knows that silence is enough, because he trusts his own path. He doesn't need approval. He doesn't need permission. He doesn't need to be understood. He only needs to keep walking. This is the difference between a boy and a man. A boy screams, defends, explains, because he's still trying to prove himself. A man stays silent, because he has nothing to prove, and that silence, that refusal to explain, is what makes him dangerous. Picture this. You walk into a room. People start talking. They question your choices. They laugh at your discipline. They gossip about your solitude. Most men would rush to explain. I'm not arrogant, I'm just focused. I'm not antisocial, I'm just working on myself. I'm not lost, I'm building something greater. But you say nothing. You let them choke on their own assumptions, and in that silence, they feel it. The weight of your presence, the mystery of your mind, the power of a man who does not beg to be seen. And here's the lesson: explanation is cheap. Anyone can speak, but silence is rare. And because it's rare, it's respected. The fewer words you spend on others, the more value your words hold when you finally choose to speak. That's why men of power are often quiet. When they do speak, the world listens. Because they've proven they don't waste their breath explaining themselves to the undeserving. But let's not sugarcoat it. Silence will cost you. People will misunderstand you. They'll call you cold. They'll say you think you're better. They'll label you distant, arrogant, heartless. And you must accept this. You must embrace being misunderstood. Because here's the secret: being misunderstood is freedom. The more they misunderstand you, the less they can control you. The more you let them believe what they want, the less energy you waste. And while they sit and gossip, you rise. While they misjudge you, you grow. While they misunderstand you, you become untouchable. So I ask you again, what if you stopped explaining today? What if you let them believe the lies, the rumors, the half-truths? What if you walked away and let silence be your response? Would it hurt? Yes. Would it be lonely? At first, yes. But over time, it would become your greatest strength. Because when you no longer explain, you no longer depend. And when you no longer depend, you are finally free. Brother, listen to me. Your worth does not live in their understanding. Your worth lives in your discipline. Your worth lives in your vision. Your worth lives in your silence. You don't need to tell them who you are. You need to show yourself who you are. And the man who chooses silence over explanation is the man who finally meets himself face to face. This is why men who stop explaining themselves walk with a different aura. They are calm, steady, grounded. They don't rush to prove, to defend, to convince. They simply exist, and that existence alone shakes the room. Because the world is not used to a man who doesn't beg to be understood. The world is used to men who talk too much, explain too much, apologize too much. So when a man walks in silence, he is unforgettable, he is feared, he is untouchable. And this, my brother, is the power waiting for you. But it begins with one choice: stop explaining. The moment you catch yourself about to justify, stop. The moment someone demands a reason, pause. The moment you feel the urge to defend, choose silence. Because every time you choose silence, you are taking back your power. Every time you stay silent, you are breaking the chains of dependency. Every time you refuse to explain, you are becoming untouchable. So let this sink in: your explanations are your weakness. Your silence is your weapon. Your refusal to justify is your freedom. And when you master this, you will walk through life with a strength that cannot be touched, cannot be broken, cannot be controlled. This is the lesson of part 2. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is everything. It is power. It is dignity. It is freedom. And it is the beginning of the untouchable man you were always meant to become. There comes a moment when a man realizes the greatest explanation he can ever give is not with words, but with his life. Your silence is not the absence of sound. It's the presence of mastery. And when you finally stop explaining yourself, the world sees something terrifying: a man who answers to no one but himself. That is the man who cannot be bought. That is the man who cannot be broken. That is the man who becomes untouchable. Listen carefully. Your silence is not about ignoring the world. It's about anchoring yourself so deeply in your own truth that nothing shakes you. Do you know what destroys most men? It's not failure. It's not loss. It's the endless bleeding of energy, explaining themselves to people who never cared in the first place. They waste their life begging to be understood, while their mission dies in the shadows. But the man who stops explaining, he chooses a different road. He chooses to be misunderstood. He chooses to walk alone if he must. He chooses his mission over their approval. And that choice, that single choice, changes everything. Because here's the life lesson you need to burn into your soul. You do not owe anyone your explanation. You owe yourself your destiny. The day you realize this, everything shifts. The insults don't sting. The doubts don't distract. The silence becomes your armor, and your results become your voice. And brother, there is nothing more deafening than the roar of results born from silence. Think about history. The men we remember, the men we respect, the men we whisper about in awe. They were all misunderstood in their time. They didn't waste their lives explaining. They acted. They built. They endured the mockery, the loneliness, the exile. And when the dust settled, their silence became legend. And that's what I want for you. I don't want you to spend your life chasing approval, begging to be seen, explaining who you are. I want you to become the man who doesn't need to explain, the man whose presence speaks louder than his voice, the man whose silence shakes the ground. Because here's the final truth: explanation is temporary, but silence is eternal. Words fade, justifications get forgotten, but the silence of a man who refuses to bend, people never forget that. They carry it with them. They replay it in their minds. They wonder, how could he stay so calm? How could he walk away without a word? How could he keep building when we doubted him? And in that wondering, they are haunted by you. So let me leave you with this. Your life is not a courtroom, and you are not on trial. You don't need to defend yourself to anyone. Not to your family, not to your friends, not to the world. The only one you owe anything to is the man staring back at you in the mirror. Prove yourself to him. Honor him. Stay loyal to him. Because once you do that, no force on this earth can touch you. A man who explains himself is fragile. A man who stops explaining becomes free. And a free man is untouchable. So walk in silence. Let your results be your words. Let your peace be your weapon. Let your discipline be your explanation. And when the world looks at you in confusion, when they whisper, when they rage, when they doubt, say nothing. Just keep walking. Because your silence will echo louder than their noise. And one day, when you stand unshaken, untouchable, unstoppable, they will finally understand what your silence always meant. That you never needed them. That you never feared them. That you only chose yourself, and choosing yourself made you untouchable.